Hello class, this is Manuel, and in this video tutorial I'm going to try to explain what past simple is and how we use it in English uh, to make affirmative sentences. Negative sentences and questions will be covered in a second video. Let's get started. Well, one thing that we need to explain beforehand is that in English there is just one past tense, as opposed to Spanish where we have two. So a verb like play, which in Spanish is jugar, uh, that only has one past form, that is played with ed. Um, in Spanish, verb jugar can be understood in different ways. Let's have a look at the sentences. We have first sentence, which is he played soccer last week, and that can be understood in Spanish like el jugó fútbol, right? Whereas the second sentence, which is he played soccer, again, is the exact same word, he played soccer, but that can be understood as el jugaba fútbol cuando era niño. And that's very important because it's source of confusion in beginners and people who are starting to get familiar with past tense. They think that they are always looking for the other past, all right? But it's just not there because in English there is just one past tense. In Spanish, well, we have two, but well, it is what it is. We have another example there. It's the same thing, right? We have the verb study conjugated in past tense. Is they studied for the exam, they studied dentistry. They can be understood in two different ways in Spanish. Ellos estudiaron o ellos estudiaban. Ellos estudiaron para el examen, ellos estudiaban odontología, right? But in English, it's just one form, and that's it, all right? So hopefully that's clear. Well, let's talk about the form of past tense verbs in English. We have two categories: regular and irregular verbs. Now, regular verbs, the way that we make a regular verb past is by adding ed or just d, depending on whether it ends in e or not, to the verb, and that's it. For example, we have the verb play, and if we just add ed, well, we have play in past tense, which is played. Same thing happens with study, but study finishes with y, and those verbs that finish with y, they have their own set of rules. Uh, on the contrary, we have a verb like teach. Teach is an irregular verb. It's not a matter of adding ed to the word teach and we have the past tense. No, we need to know, we really need to memorize the word taught. And the word memorize is important here because memory is going to be your best friend when it comes to irregular verbs. They follow no logic, and really the only thing you can do about them is memorize it. Is memorize how you spell them and memorize how you pronounce them, right? And that's it. Well, let's practice a little bit. We have these verbs. Let's try to make them past, right? What would you do to turn these verbs into past forms? Let's pause the video and see how you do. Well, hopefully your solutions look something like this. In most cases, it was just enough to add the letters ed, right? In cases number 3 and 4, we didn't need to add a second e because the verb already finishes with letter e, like is like or hate, which is hate. It's just a matter of adding an extra d. Now, a verb like study, remember, that finishes with y, and that's special, and that's the next thing that we're going to talk about. And we have it right here. Let's have a look at these verbs. We have 5 verbs here: verbs play, stay, cry, try, and study. And what they all have in common, besides being regular, is that they all finish with letter y. Now, in some cases, like the first two, played and stayed, I just add ed and that's it. I form the past tense, right? But in cases like try, cry, try, study, I change letter y. I change it for the letter I. And why is that? Why is it that I make that such change in one case and I do not in the other? Well, in the first case, in play and stay, the letter before the letter Y, it's a vowel. In this case, the vowel A. That's the reason why we just add an extra ed and we have the past tense form. In the case of cry, try, and study, the letter before the letter Y, it's a consonant. And in those cases, I need to change a letter Y for a letter I, and I obtain the past tense form. So that's the logic that explains the different spelling of regular verbs that finish with Y, right? Well, it's time for some practice. In this particular case, we have a bunch of verbs on the box. We need to choose the right verb for each sentence, and also we need to make it past. Like for example, the correct verb is live, and I make it past by adding an extra D. This is a verb that already finishes with letter E, right? So let's pause the video and try to solve the exercise. Well, class, hopefully it looks your solution looks something like this. And notice that the verb die just needs an extra D, right? It's a verb that finishes with letter E. And notice the verbs 4 and 5 that finish with letter Y. We already talked about that, right? Wow. The second part of this video has to do with verb to be. Remember that verb to be is always special, it's always different, and we need to talk about it separately. So verb to be has two different forms in past tense, and that depends on the pronoun. That doesn't happen with all the other verbs. With a verb like, for example, played, is the same for all the pronouns, and you would say I played, you played, she played, etc. Not with verb to be. With verb to be, you really need to pay attention to which pronoun you're using. So it's going to be was with pronouns I, she, he, and it. So you will end up with things like I was, she was, he was, etc. Right? And with pronouns we, you, and they, the correct form is were. Right? So you're going to have things like we were, you were, they were. Right? So that's the way we say yo estaba, yo estuve, yo era, yo fui. We would say I was. If you want to say yo era feliz, you would say I was happy. If you want to say yo estaba en la fiesta, you would say I was at the party, and so on and so forth. Let's practice a little bit. So here we have a bunch of sentences where the verb is missing, and in all cases we have to complete with one form of verb to be in past. So we need to decide whether we're going to use was or we're going to use were. Again, let's pause the video and make a decision. Well, class, hopefully your solution looks something like this. I was in Canberra, we were at school, Tina was. Remember that we say Tina was because Tina is a woman, so it's the same as if we were saying she was, right? He was happy. Robert and Stan are two men, so it's the same as if we were saying they were, right? That's the reason why we use were with Robert and Stan. That's it. Well, I want to finish this video by talking about an interesting website that I came across while preparing this tutorial. The address is right there, and in this website you can basically hear the pronunciation of any English word that you type, and that's really helpful because sometimes we don't know the logic of pronunciation in English, especially when you're just beginning to learn the language, and we need to be sure. So, well, this is not perfect. Until now, no software is perfect, but it's pretty close, and it's really helpful. And so, whenever you need to know the pronunciation of a word, you just type the word there, and you can hear it. Well, class, hopefully you got something out of this video. Don't forget to check the next one, which is about questions and negative statements in past tense. Right? See you.